When my daughter told the hospital staff I wasn't allowed to visit her room, I felt my chest tighten in a way no heart attack could match. I had been waiting 9 long months for this moment, the chance to hold my first grandchild, to prove to Anna that I was no longer the man who disappeared from her childhood. But instead of hearing a baby's cry, I heard the flat, unshakable voice of a nurse. "Sir, you're not on the approved list." I stood there, clutching a stuffed bear in one hand and a bouquet of lilies in the other, replaying every mile I'd driven to make up for the miles I'd missed when she was a child. And in that moment, every mile felt wasted. What Anna didn't know, what she couldn't know, was the truth about why I wasn't there when she needed me years ago. A truth her mother buried. A truth locked away with a letter I wrote when she was 10. And now, standing outside a hospital room, I realize this wasn't just about a locked door. It was about unlocking years of pain, secrets, and a decision that could either close our story forever or crack it open just enough for hope to seep through. Stay with me, because what happened next will take you from the cold hallway of that hospital to a dinner invitation I never thought I'd receive. I used to believe time could fix anything. That's what I told myself during the years when my job took me from one end of the country to the other, hauling freight for weeks at a time. Out on the open road, with nothing but the hum of the engine and endless asphalt ahead, I told myself that someday, when life slowed down, I'd make it up to my daughter. My name is John Miller. I'm 55 years old, and I've spent more nights in motels than in my own home. When Anna was born, I promised myself, and my then-wife Karen, that I'd be there for every milestone. I remember holding her in the delivery room, promising her a life where she'd always feel safe, always feel loved. That promise didn't survive the reality of long-haul trucking. The bills piled up. My company was always short on drivers. And before I knew it, just a few days on the road turned into weeks, then months. Karen and I began to fight. Quietly at first, then like thunder. She said I was married to my rig. I told her I was just trying to keep the lights on. When Anna was 8, the divorce papers came. I thought joint custody meant I'd still be part of her life. But part of her life turned into alternate weekends, then missed weekends, then an awkward phone call here and there. Birthdays were replaced by packages delivered late. I missed her first piano recital, her first big spelling bee win, and later, her high school graduation. Every missed moment became a quiet ache. Every silence on the phone was another reminder that I wasn't there. And each time I saw her, she was taller, more guarded. The little girl who used to run into my arms had learned to keep her distance. After the divorce, Karen remarried, and I told myself Anna was fine. She had a stepfather who could be there for her in the ways I couldn't. But the truth was, I didn't push hard enough to stay close. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear that she'd reject me outright. So I let distance become habit. Years passed in a blur of highways, loading docks, and truck stop coffee. Then, one winter night, I was parked at a rest area in Wyoming, and I got a call that changed everything. Karen had passed away unexpectedly. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My first thought wasn't about the years we'd fought. It was about Anna. She'd lost her mother, the anchor in her life. And what did she have left? A father who was more of a stranger than family. I tried calling her that night. She answered, voice steady but cold. "Thanks for calling, Dad. I'm fine." We talked for less than 2 minutes. That was 3 years ago. Now, retired from the road, I live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Omaha. The silence in my home is heavy, the kind of silence that amplifies regret. I spend my mornings making coffee, reading old trucking magazines, and wondering if Anna thinks of me at all. Then last year, out of the blue, she called. I'll never forget her voice. It was tentative, almost careful. Dad, I wanted you to know I'm pregnant. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My mind was already racing ahead, imagining myself holding a grandchild, finally getting a chance to be the kind of father and grandfather I'd always wanted to be. I promised her I'd help however I could. Money wasn't tight anymore. My health was steady. All I needed was the chance. She thanked me, politely, the way you thank a neighbor who brings over a casserole. And then the call ended. In the months that followed, I sent her small things. A handmade crib from a carpenter friend, a savings bond for the baby's future, a stack of children's books I'd chosen carefully. She sent short texts of thanks, sometimes with a smiley face, sometimes just a got it. I told myself it was a start, that relationships aren't rebuilt overnight. But there were signs that I wasn't as close to her life as I thought. I wasn't invited to the baby shower. When her friends posted photos online, I saw smiling faces, piles of presents, and a chair where I wasn't sitting. Still, I convinced myself that when the baby arrived, everything would change. A grandchild has a way of softening old grudges. I pictured being at the hospital, maybe pacing the hallway like in the movies, then walking into her room and seeing her smile, just a little, and handing me the baby. I clung to that image the way I once clung to the wheel of my truck on an icy road. Because for the first time in decades, I felt like I was headed somewhere worth going. And I promised myself, this time I wouldn't miss my turn. Hope is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or grand announcements. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a simple text message on your birthday. Last year, for the first time in a decade, Anna sent me one. Happy birthday, Dad. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, rereading those 3 words. They weren't warm. They weren't full of emojis or exclamation marks, but they were there. And for me, that was enough. I'd been trying to reach out more, calls that often went to voicemail, short conversations where she'd ask about my health, then politely excuse herself because she had to get back to work. Each time, I told myself not to push too hard. I didn't want to scare away the fragile bridge we were trying to build. For her birthday that year, I mailed a small gift, a silver charm bracelet with a single heart-shaped pendant. Inside the box, I wrote, "One charm for now, more to come if you'll let me." She texted back a simple, "Thanks, Dad." It wasn't much, but it was more than silence. Months later came the call that made me sit down at my kitchen table and hold my breath. Anna was pregnant. She told me in the same cautious tone she'd used on my birthday, as if she wasn't sure how I'd react. "I wanted you to know," she said. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone tightly. "Anna, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. You're going to be a great mom." There was a pause. "Thanks, Dad." I wanted to say more, ask about the father, her plans, the due date, but I could feel her hesitance through the phone. So I bit my tongue. In the weeks that followed, I sent her things I thought she might need. A gift card for baby supplies, a hand-knit baby blanket from a woman at my church, a check, just in case money was tight. She always acknowledged them, but in a way that kept me at arm's length. Got it, thanks. Still, I couldn't help but feel hopeful. A grandchild changes things. It softens edges, reopens conversations. I imagined holding that baby, seeing a spark of something familiar in its eyes, maybe even earning back some of the moments I'd lost. One afternoon, I worked up the courage to ask if she wanted me to help with the nursery. I had tools, time, and a desperate need to feel useful. There was a long silence before she answered. "That's kind of you, Dad, but we've got it covered." Something in her tone made me stop pressing. Still, she didn't shut me out completely. Occasionally, she'd call for small things, asking about a recipe her mother used to make, or if I knew where she could find an old family photo. They were tiny windows, but I tried to keep them open. One evening, near the end of her second trimester, I called just to check in. She sounded tired, but less guarded than usual. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I'm okay, just a little overwhelmed," she admitted. There was a long pause before she added, almost as if she was talking to herself, "I hope this time will be different." I frowned. "Different how?" She hesitated, then brushed it off. "I just mean different from how things used to be. You know, with family." Her words sat heavy in my chest. It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't forgiveness either. It was a quiet truth, one I didn't fully understand, but one that made me realize she was carrying more than just the weight of the baby. I wanted to promise her that it would be different, that I'd show up this time. But promises are tricky things, especially when you've broken them before. So I said the only thing I could without making it worse. "I'll be here, Anna, however you need me." There was a soft sigh on the other end of the line, almost like she wanted to believe me. "Okay, Dad." That night, I lay awake replaying her words. I hope this time will be different. It felt like a key, though I didn't know yet what door it would unlock. The first sign came in the form of an Instagram post I wasn't supposed to see. I don't use social media much, but a former coworker's wife, someone who still keeps in touch with Karen's side of the family, tagged me in a photo of a homemade bookshelf. Out of curiosity, I clicked on her profile, scrolled a bit, and that's when I saw it. A bright, pastel-decorated living room, balloons spelling out baby shower, and my daughter in the center, smiling in a soft blue maternity dress. Around her were women I didn't know, a few familiar faces from Karen's side, and a table stacked with gifts wrapped in cheerful colors. It looked perfect, except for one thing. I hadn't been invited. At first, I told myself there must have been some mistake. Maybe it was a small gathering for her close friends. Maybe she'd planned another one for family later. But the longer I stared at the photo, the harder it was to convince myself. Later that week, I called Anna. I didn't mention the photo. I didn't want to sound accusatory. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Good. Tired. The shower went well." The shower. She said it like I already knew. "I'm glad," I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. Part of me wanted to ask why I wasn't there. The other part, the part that had learned to tread carefully, told me to let it go. A few days later, I heard from an old friend of Karen's that there was a group chat for everyone helping Anna get ready. A chat I wasn't in. It shouldn't have surprised me. I hadn't been there for the planning stages of anything in her life. Why would this be different? Still, I tried to stay positive. I told myself she was just busy, that she didn't mean to leave me out. I even imagined that maybe she thought I wouldn't want to be involved in all the small details. But late at night, when the house was quiet, the doubts crept in. What if she didn't want me there because she still didn't trust me? What if all the calls, the gifts, the polite thank yous had been just courtesy? I started noticing other small things. When I asked about the nursery, she'd say, "We've got it covered." When I offered to drive her to an appointment, she'd tell me her husband was taking her. They weren't rejections exactly, but they built up like bricks in a wall I couldn't see over. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to drive by their house just to drop off a baby rocker I'd found at a local store. I didn't plan to stay, just leave it on the porch with a note. As I pulled up, I saw through the window that the living room was full of people. A couple of women were arranging baby clothes. Someone else was hanging decorations. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching, my hand resting on the box in the passenger seat. No one inside looked toward the window. No one noticed I was there. I thought about knocking, but something in me hesitated. I didn't want to intrude, didn't want to see the look on Anna's face if she opened the door and realized she hadn't expected me. So I left the box on the porch, tucked the note under the ribbon, and drove away before anyone came out. That night, she sent a text. "Thanks for the rocker, Dad. It's great." No photo of her using it. No message about me coming by. Just, "Thanks." I stared at that text for a long time, feeling the distance between us in every word. But I told myself what I always did. Maybe she's busy. Maybe she doesn't realize how it feels, because hope is stubborn, and mine refused to die. Not yet. The warning came out of nowhere. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was sorting through the mail when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Linda Barrett. Linda had been one of Karen's closest friends. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the divorce. In my mind, she was firmly in Anna's corner, which usually meant she wasn't in mine. Her message was short. "John, can we talk? I think you should know something before the baby comes." I hesitated before replying. It could be nothing, or it could be something I wasn't ready to hear. I finally typed back, "Sure, what's going on?" She didn't answer in writing. Instead, my phone rang. Her voice was older, rougher than I remembered. "John, I'm going to make this quick. Don't expect too much from Anna right now. She's carrying more than just the baby. And there are things about your marriage to Karen, things you may not know, that she's grown up believing." I felt my grip on the phone tighten. "What are you talking about? What things?" Linda sighed. "This isn't my story to tell. Not all of it. But I will say this. The way Karen explained your absence, it wasn't the whole truth. And Anna's version of you has been shaped by that for a long time." A sharp chill ran through me. "You mean she lied?" Linda hesitated. "I'm saying there are gaps, and those gaps were filled in a way that didn't do you any favors." I leaned against the counter, trying to process her words. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you keep showing up, John. And I think maybe you deserve to know why it feels like you're still on the outside looking in. Just don't push her. Not yet." Before I could ask more, she ended the call. I stood there for a long time, staring at my phone, her words echoing in my head. It wasn't the first time I'd suspected that Karen's version of our marriage might not match mine. We'd fought about money, about my time on the road, about what she called my priorities. But I'd always assumed Anna knew the basics, that I loved her, that my absence was a failure of circumstance, not of care. What if that wasn't what she'd been told? I replayed moments in my head. The way Anna's eyes sometimes hardened when I brought up the past. The way she avoided questions about her childhood. The way she'd said, "I hope this time will be different." I'd thought she meant different from the years of missed birthdays and phone calls. But what if she meant different from the version of me she'd grown up knowing? I wanted to call her right then, to ask directly. But Linda's warning stopped me. Don't push her. Not yet. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of me, thinking about the years I'd missed. Not just physically, but in her mind. If there really was another version of our story, one I didn't know, then maybe my absence had been more than just time on the road. Maybe it had been filled with someone else's words, someone else's narrative. And if that was true, then winning her trust back wasn't just about showing up now. It was about undoing years of something I didn't even understand yet. I didn't sleep much that night. And when I did, I dreamed about knocking on a door that never opened. The call came just after dawn on a chilly Saturday morning. I had been drinking my second cup of coffee when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was a man's. Calm, polite, and businesslike. "Mr. Miller, this is Daniel, Anna's husband. She went into labor early this morning. They're at St. Luke's." For a moment, my mind froze. Then everything inside me jolted awake. Is she okay? The baby? They're both fine. Still in delivery, but I thought you should know. I didn't wait for more details. I grabbed my jacket, the stuffed bear I'd been saving for months, and the bouquet of lilies I'd bought just yesterday. The drive to the hospital felt like both seconds and hours. Every red light was an insult. Every slow car in front of me a test of patience. I kept picturing Anna holding her baby, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment things could start to change. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, the cold wind stung my face, but I hardly noticed. My heart was pounding as I walked through the automatic doors, clutching the flowers and the bear like lifelines. At the front desk, a nurse looked up with a practiced smile. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, my voice tight with excitement. "My daughter, Anna Reynolds. She just gave birth. I'm here to see her." Her smile faltered just slightly. She glanced at her computer, typed something, and then looked back at me with a careful expression. "I'm sorry, sir, but your name isn't on the approved visitors list." The words hit harder than I expected. There must be some mistake. I'm her father. "I understand," she said gently, "but we can't allow anyone into the maternity ward unless the patient has approved them in advance. You're not on the list." I felt my grip tighten on the bouquet. "Can you check again? Maybe under Miller instead of Reynolds?" She checked. She shook her head. "I'm sorry." The air in the lobby felt heavier. I stepped aside, letting another family approach the desk, their arms full of balloons and diaper bags. They were waved through easily. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. The automatic doors behind me kept opening and closing, letting in blasts of cold air. I walked toward the maternity wing anyway, my steps slow, deliberate. A nurse intercepted me halfway. "Sir, I can't let you back there unless you're on the list." "I just want to see my daughter," I said, my voice quieter now. "I understand, but we have to respect her wishes." "Her wishes?" The words settled like lead in my chest. I stopped just outside the hallway that led to the patient rooms. From where I stood, I could see the door to her room, closed. Behind it, Anna was holding her baby, my grandchild, for the first time. And I was standing on the wrong side of the door, just like I had been for most of her life. Memories started flooding back. Her 8th birthday, when I promised I'd be there, but ended up stuck in a snowstorm 2 states away. Her high school graduation, where my seat stayed empty because my truck broke down in Kansas. Her wedding day, where I stood at the very back of the ceremony, unsure if I was welcome, clapping softly while others hugged her. And now, here I was again, close enough to touch the door, but still on the outside. I leaned against the wall, the flowers trembling slightly in my hand. A nurse walked past and glanced at me, but didn't stop. Through the thin hospital walls, I thought I heard a faint baby's cry. I closed my eyes. In that moment, I felt the weight of every mile I'd driven away from her, every phone call I hadn't made, every holiday I'd missed. It wasn't just a closed door. It was every closed door between us, condensed into one quiet hallway. I didn't know how long I stood there, but eventually I realized the flowers in my hand were starting to wilt in the warm hospital air. I turned and walked back toward the lobby, the automatic doors opening once again, releasing me into the cold morning. The stuffed bear felt heavier now. I was halfway to the parking lot when I heard my name. John! I turned to see Daniel, Anna's husband, walking briskly toward me. He was wearing a pair of gray scrubs, his hair a mess, his phone in one hand. He looked exhausted, but there was a firmness in his expression that told me this conversation wasn't going to be simple. I waited until he caught up. "She's okay," he said immediately, reading the worry in my face. "Anna and the baby are both healthy. But," he hesitated, "but I'm not allowed in," I finished for him. Daniel exhaled slowly, almost as if he'd rehearsed this. "John, she's just not ready. She needs rest, and things have been overwhelming. It's not about you personally." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It feels a little personal." He looked down, then back up at me. "She asked for privacy. The labor was long, and she's exhausted. She just needs some quiet right now. Please understand that." I nodded, because what else could I do? "I understand." Hey, it wasn't a lie. I did understand. On some level. Childbirth is exhausting. Privacy matters. But the words "she's not ready" rang with a hollow note. It didn't feel like the whole truth. We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching. Daniel checked his phone, then put it away. "I'll let her know you came by. And thank you for the flowers and the bear. She'll appreciate them." I nodded again. My voice felt tight when I answered. "Take care of her." Daniel gave a quick nod and walked back toward the hospital, disappearing through the sliding doors. I stayed there for a long time, my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets. The cold air cut through me, but it wasn't what was making me shiver. Something about the way Daniel had said, "She's not ready," reminded me of the way people choose their words carefully when they're avoiding the truth. I started back toward my truck, but as I passed the smoking area on the side of the hospital, I heard voices. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my name caught my attention like a hook. "John can't come in. She made that clear," a woman's voice said. I froze. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. Familiar, edged with that same sharpness I remembered. Karen's voice. Except Karen had been gone for years. I moved closer, carefully, until I could see around the corner. It wasn't Karen. It was someone who looked like her, older, but with the same sharp eyes. It took me a moment to place her. Melissa, my ex-wife's sister, the woman who had made her opinions about me very clear during the divorce. She was standing with Daniel, her arms crossed, a cigarette smoldering between her fingers. "I know," Daniel was saying, "but I didn't expect him to actually show up this fast. I figured I'd have time to, I don't know, explain it better." Melissa took a long drag and exhaled. "You don't need to explain anything to him. Anna made her decision a long time ago. She doesn't want him in there. And honestly, can you blame her? After everything she's been told?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "That's the thing. I'm not sure she's been told everything accurately." Melissa shot him a sharp look. "It's not our job to sort that out today. She just had a baby. She doesn't need any stress, especially not from him." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I just think—" "You think too much," Melissa interrupted. "Do her a favor and keep him at arm's length. At least for now." Daniel didn't answer. His phone buzzed again, and he excused himself, heading back toward the entrance. Melissa flicked her cigarette into the tray, her expression tight, then followed him. I stood, frozen in place. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear in a way that felt almost dangerous. This wasn't just about Anna being tired. This wasn't about a long labor. There was something else, something unspoken, keeping me on the other side of that door. And Melissa's words, "after everything she's been told," cut deep. What had Anna been told? I thought about Linda's warning. There are things about your marriage to Karen, things you may not know, that she's grown up believing. Pieces started fitting together in ways I didn't like. It wasn't just time that had built the wall between me and my daughter. It was a narrative, one I hadn't been there to defend myself against. And Melissa was still guarding that narrative like a secret that couldn't be touched. I walked back to my truck, the stuffed bear still sitting in the passenger seat, the lilies beginning to droop. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I sat there, my breath fogging up the windshield, listening to the muted hum of hospital activity in the distance. The official reason was simple. She's not ready. She needs quiet. But the truth was tangled somewhere in the past, tied up in the words of people who had shaped my absence into a story. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about getting into that room. It was about getting to the truth. Linda called again 2 days after the hospital. Her voice was direct, with none of the polite hesitation from our first conversation. "John, I think it's time we meet," she said. "In person." We agreed on a small coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that still smelled like real beans instead of burnt sugar. I got there early, nervous energy running through me like a live wire. Linda arrived right on time. She looked older, like all of us, but her eyes were still sharp. She ordered tea, sat down across from me, and went straight to the point. "You want to know why Anna keeps you at arm's length?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I think I deserve that much." She leaned back in her chair, studying me for a moment before speaking. After the divorce, Karen was angry and hurt. She told Anna a version of events that made her the stable parent, and you, the one who left, because you wanted your career more than your family. She told Anna that you chose the road over her. I felt a deep ache in my chest. "That's not how it happened." Linda nodded slowly. "I know, but Anna doesn't." I gripped the edge of the table. So she grew up thinking I just abandoned her? Linda's expression softened slightly. John, she was a little girl. Kids believe what they're told, especially when it comes from the parent who's there every day. Karen told her you missed birthdays and school events because you didn't care. What she didn't tell her was that you missed them because you were trying to recover from the accident. I froze. She never told Anna about that? Linda shook her head. Not once. She told people you were on the road, when in reality, you were in the hospital, and then in physical therapy for months after the wreck. She didn't want Anna to see you weak. Or maybe she didn't want her to know she'd pushed you away during that time. I sat back, stunned. The accident was one of the lowest points of my life. I'd been hauling freight through Colorado when a snowstorm spun my rig out of control. I walked away alive, but not unscathed. A back injury forced me off the road for nearly a year. I'd called Karen, expecting support, but instead I was met with cold detachment. By the time I could work again, the divorce was in motion. And now I knew why Anna had never asked about it. She didn't know it had happened. She's lived her whole life thinking I chose work over her, I said quietly. Linda nodded. It's more complicated than that, but yes, that's the version she knows. That's why when you send gifts or call, she keeps you at a distance. It's not just time you're fighting against, John. It's the story she's been told about who you are. I rubbed my forehead, trying to steady myself. Why are you telling me this now? Linda looked me dead in the eye. Because she's about to raise a child, and I think she deserves to know the truth. Whatever she decides to do with it. But if she's going to hear it, it should come from you. Not me. Not Daniel. You. Her words settled heavily between us. I stared out the coffee shop window, watching cars pass by. People going about their lives without knowing mine had just shifted on its axis. For years, I'd believed the distance between me and Anna was built from my absence. Now, I understood it was built from a narrative, a lie of omission that had cemented itself into her memory. And if I didn't address it, it would stay there, unchallenged. I don't want to hurt her, I said finally. Linda's voice softened. The truth might hurt, but lies hurt longer. We finished our drinks in silence. When Linda left, she squeezed my hand once, as if to say good luck, and then walked out into the winter air. I stayed at the table a little longer, my mind racing. Melissa's words at the hospital, Linda's warning, Anna's cool distance, they all made sense now. Anna didn't just see me as the father who missed too much. She saw me as the man who chose the road over her. And until that image changed, every step I took toward her would feel like I was walking against the wind. I left the coffee shop knowing one thing. If there was any hope of reaching her, it would start with telling her the truth she'd been kept from for decades. I was getting ready to leave the coffee shop when Linda spoke again. There's one more thing, she said, reaching into her bag. Her voice was quieter now, almost careful. She pulled out an old envelope, yellowed at the edges. My name wasn't on it. It was addressed in my handwriting, but to Anna. I stared at it. I knew that envelope. I knew every loop and slant of the handwriting on the front. This can't be... My voice trailed off. Linda slid it across the table. Karen never mailed it. I found it in a box of her things after she passed. I thought about giving it to Anna, but it didn't feel like my place. Until now. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I remembered writing this letter. I'd been in a small motel room outside Tulsa, recovering from the accident, my back still stiff from physical therapy. Anna had just turned 10. I'd missed her birthday that year, again, and I wanted to explain, to tell her I was thinking of her, that I still cared. I tore the envelope open. The paper inside, soft from age. The words hit me like a freight truck. Dear Anna, I'm sorry I couldn't be there for your birthday this year. I wish I could have seen you blow out your candles. I want you to know it's not because I don't want to. It's because I'm hurt right now, but I'm getting better. I had an accident, and I'm working hard so I can see you soon. I think about you every day. I miss you more than you know. I'm proud of you. Love, Dad. The handwriting wavered in places. I remembered how hard it had been to sit at that desk for more than a few minutes. I'd mailed it the next morning, feeling a small spark of hope that maybe she'd read it and understand. Except she never did. I set the letter down slowly, my chest tight. She never saw this, I said, my voice low. Linda shook her head. No, she didn't. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the years pressing down on me. All the times I thought she'd ignored my attempts to reach out. All the times I told myself she didn't care. It turned out she'd never even had the chance to respond. The anger came first. Anger at Karen for intercepting it. Anger at the lost time. At the misunderstandings that letter could have cleared up. But then, just as quickly, the anger faded, replaced by something heavier. Grief. I thought about 10-year-old Anna, waiting on her birthday, wondering why her father didn't call, didn't show, didn't even send a card. I thought about the version of me she must have carried in her head, that absent man who didn't care enough to even write. And now I was holding proof that I had tried, but proof 20 years too late. I rubbed my hands over my face. If she'd read this, Linda's voice was gentle. It might not have fixed everything, but it would have been a start. The truth settled in like a stone in my chest. I couldn't rewrite the past. I couldn't go back to that motel room and make sure the letter got into her hands. All I could do now was decide what to do with it in the present. I folded it carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. Give it to her, Linda said quietly. I looked up. You think she'll believe me? She'll believe the letter? Linda said. It's in your handwriting. It's your words. It's not an excuse. It's a piece of the truth she's never had. I sat there for a moment, the envelope in my hand feeling heavier than anything I'd carried on the road. This wasn't just paper and ink. It was years of distance. It was a 10-year-old's unanswered questions. And now, maybe, it could be the first step toward changing the story she'd been told. I slipped the letter into my jacket pocket, close to my chest. When I left the coffee shop, the air felt sharper, like the world had shifted slightly. I didn't know if Anna would read it. I didn't know if it would change anything, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was holding something that mattered. I didn't sleep the night I got the letter back. I kept reading it over and over, as if somewhere between the lines, there would be a map showing me exactly how to fix everything. But no matter how many times I read it, the years between then and now stayed stubbornly in place. By morning, I knew one thing. I couldn't just show up at Anna's door and demand she hear the truth. She'd just given birth. She was exhausted. She didn't owe me her attention or her forgiveness. But I couldn't leave things as they were either. I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. My hands shook a little as I began to write. Anna, I've made a lot of mistakes. I missed things I should have been there for, and I can't change that. I don't blame you for being angry. You have every right to be. But there's something you don't know, and it's only fair that you hear it from me. I told her about the accident, the one her mother never mentioned, about the months I spent in a hospital bed, then in physical therapy, trying to get back on my feet. I explained that I had written to her, that I had tried, but my letters never made it. I told her I wasn't writing this to clear my name, but because she deserved to know the truth, no matter what she chose to do with it. You don't have to forgive me, I wrote. You don't have to let me in. I just want you to know that I've always cared, even when it didn't look like it. I will respect whatever you decide. I will be here if you ever want to talk, and I will always love you, whether I'm in the room or on the other side of the door. When I finished, I read it twice, making sure there was no hint of pleading, no attempt to pressure her. It wasn't a ticket back into her life. It was a door she could open or leave closed. I folded the letter neatly, slipping it into an envelope. Then I thought about what to leave with it. The flowers from the other day had wilted in the cold, but the stuffed bear was still in perfect shape. I tied a ribbon around its neck and placed the letter between its paws. That afternoon, I drove back to the hospital. The parking lot was quieter than before, the rush of visitors having slowed. I walked through the front doors, the bear in my arms, and approached the maternity ward again. The nurse at the desk looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Mr. Miller?" she said softly. "I'm not here to see her," I said quickly. "I just want to drop something off." She nodded, her expression kind but professional. "I can make sure she gets it." I hesitated, then shook my head. "No, I want to leave it myself, just at her door. I won't knock. I won't go in." The nurse studied me for a moment, then slowly slid a visitor's pass across the counter. "Stay in the hallway. No noise. You understand?" I do. The walk down that hallway felt longer than any stretch of highway I'd ever driven. My boots were nearly silent against the polished floor. When I reached her room, the door was closed. I could hear faint voices inside. A nurse, maybe Daniel. Then a soft, unmistakable cry. My chest tightened. I set the bear down gently against the doorframe, tucking the letter securely in its ribbon. I didn't knock. I didn't linger. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand resting against the cool wood of the door. "I love you, kiddo," I whispered, so quietly no one could hear. Then I turned and walked away. As I stepped back into the hallway, I glanced over my shoulder. The bear looked small against the sterile white door. But it was there, just like the truth I'd finally put into words. I didn't know if she'd read the letter. I didn't know if she'd keep the bear. All I knew was that I'd finally done the one thing I'd failed to do for years. I'd told her the truth, without asking for anything in return. When I left the hospital, the air outside felt different, colder, sharper. But I felt lighter somehow, even if I was leaving empty-handed. I walked back to my truck, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a long moment. I had no idea what would happen next, and maybe that was okay. I didn't expect to hear anything right away. I told myself not to. I told myself the letter wasn't a trigger for some sudden reconciliation. It was a gift of truth, left at her door with no strings attached. But hope is a stubborn thing, and mine followed me all the way home. That evening, I sat in my living room, the television on but ignored, my phone lying face up on the coffee table. Every buzz, every vibration made my pulse jump. Each time it was a spam email or a wrong number. The hope dimmed a little. At the hospital, in the quiet just outside her room, Anna had noticed the bear first. Daniel had stepped into the hallway to take a phone call. A nurse brought in fresh linens. When Anna looked toward the door, she saw the small bear sitting there, a ribbon tied around its neck, a letter tucked neatly into the bow. She frowned. "What's that?" she asked. The nurse smiled softly. It was just outside the door. No one knocked. It must be from someone who wanted to congratulate you quietly. Anna hesitated before reaching for it. She recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The first lines stopped her. "I've made a lot of mistakes. I missed things I should have been there for, and I can't change that. I don't blame you for being angry. You have every right to be." She kept reading, her eyes moving slowly over each word. The accident, the months in recovery, the letter from years ago that she had never received. By the time she reached the end, her vision had blurred. "You don't have to forgive me. You don't have to let me in. I just want you to know that I've always cared, even when it didn't look like it. I will respect whatever you decide. I will be here if you ever want to talk. And I will always love you, whether I'm in the room or on the other side of the door." A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, glancing toward the baby in the bassinet beside her. Daniel stepped back in, pocketing his phone. "Everything okay?" Anna didn't answer right away. She folded the letter carefully, her fingers lingering on the paper as if it might vanish if she let go. "He left this?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "He said he didn't want to disturb you." Anna looked back at the bear, then at the letter in her lap. For a moment, Daniel thought she might ask him to bring John in, that maybe the letter had shifted something inside her. But instead, she placed the letter on the nightstand, next to the small stack of diapers and baby wipes. She didn't hide it, but she didn't reach for her phone either. Her silence was heavier than any angry words could have been. Daniel sat beside her, unsure what to say. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said gently. "I know," she replied. Her voice was soft, but it carried something else beneath it. Fatigue, maybe fear. She glanced once more at the door, as if half expecting it to open, but it stayed closed. Hours later, after Daniel had fallen asleep in the chair and the baby's soft breathing filled the room, Anna picked up the letter again. She read it twice more, her fingers tracing the lines of her father's handwriting. She thought about her childhood, the missed birthdays, the empty seats, the phone calls that came too late or not at all. She thought about her mother's words, the story she'd grown up with about a man who had chosen his work over his family. And now she thought about this letter. The truth wasn't simple. It never had been. She wanted to believe him, but belief didn't erase the years. It didn't erase the hurt. She placed the letter back on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. Back at home, I was still sitting in my living room when I realized it was nearly midnight. No call, no message, just silence. I told myself it was okay. She'd just had a baby. She was exhausted. She had other things to think about. But deep down, the silence felt familiar. I'd imagined a dozen possible outcomes when I left that letter. One of them was that she'd call right away, ask me to come back. Another was that she'd at least send a message, some small sign that she'd read it. But as the hours passed, reality sank in. Hope rose like a tide in the morning, but by nightfall, it had receded, leaving me on the shore again. And yet, even in the quiet, even with the disappointment pressing in, I knew this was different from before. Because this time, the silence wasn't built on lies. This time, she had the truth. And whatever she decided to do with it was up to her. 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of quiet. Life fell back into its usual rhythm, or at least it tried to. I went to the grocery store, fixed the loose hinge on the back door, spent my mornings reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. But no matter what I did, my mind kept circling back to the hospital, to that bear, to the letter. Every evening, I checked my phone more times than I cared to admit. The silence wasn't unexpected, but it still pressed down like a weight. And then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message that made me stop in my tracks. If you're free, come to dinner tomorrow. I want you to meet her. It was from Anna. I read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might disappear if I looked away. There was no apology, no explanation, just an invitation. Simple, cautious, but real. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to call her immediately, to tell her yes, absolutely, I'd be there. But something stopped me. This wasn't about rushing in. This wasn't about barging through a door the moment it cracked open. This was about stepping forward carefully, respecting that this invitation was a risk for her. I typed a short reply. I'd be honored. What time? She responded almost right away. 6. Bring nothing. Just yourself. I stared at the screen, a strange mix of emotions churning in my chest. The next 24 hours passed in a haze. I cleaned the kitchen, even though no one was coming over. I ironed a shirt I hadn't worn in months. I even caught myself rehearsing what I might say, how to greet her, how to greet the baby. By the time the next evening came, my palms were sweating. The drive to her house felt longer than it was. Every turn of the wheel brought a new wave of nerves. What if she changed her mind? What if she'd only invited me out of some sense of obligation? When I finally pulled into her driveway, I sat in the truck for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The house was modest, warm light spilling from the windows. There was a small swing set in the yard, probably for the future, when the baby was older. I stepped out slowly, my breath visible in the cool evening air. Daniel opened the door before I could knock. "John," he said with a small smile, "come on in." I stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around me. It smelled faintly of something cooking, roast chicken maybe. Anna was in the living room, holding the baby. She looked tired, but there was a softness in her expression I hadn't seen in years. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was steady, calm. "Hi, Anna," I replied, my own voice catching slightly. My eyes drifted to the baby in her arms. "Is this—" She nodded, stepping closer. "This is Emily, your granddaughter." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just looked at her. Tiny, wrapped in a soft blanket, her little face scrunching as she shifted in Anna's arms. "She's beautiful," I said finally. Anna gave a small smile, then gestured toward the couch. "Here, sit. Do you want to hold her?" My heart felt like it might burst. I'd love to. She carefully placed Emily in my arms. I held her as gently as I could, her small weight both fragile and solid at the same time. For a moment, the room felt impossibly still. I looked up at Anna, But she was watching Emily, her expression unreadable. There was no apology in her eyes, no sudden reconciliation. But there was something else, something that felt like the first brick being pulled from the wall between us. We didn't talk about the letter. We didn't talk about the past. We just talked about Emily, her feeding schedule, her habit of sleeping only when the house was noisy, the way she made a face when she was about to sneeze. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, potatoes, a salad. Conversation stayed light. I didn't push. As the evening wound down, I stood to leave. Anna walked me to the door. Emily, asleep in her arms. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Thanks for having me," I replied. There was a pause, and then she added, almost quietly, "Maybe we can do this again sometime." I nodded. "I'd like that." Driving home that night, I realized something important. This wasn't a victory. This wasn't the end of the story where everything was magically fixed. It was just dinner. But it was dinner I never thought I'd have. And that was enough. Dinner had finished, but I stayed a little longer than I expected. The house was quiet now. Emily had drifted off to sleep, her tiny breaths barely audible from the bassinet in the corner. Daniel was in the kitchen, clearing the dishes, leaving Anna and me in the living room. I sat on the couch, my hands resting on my knees. The stuffed bear I'd left at the hospital was sitting on a shelf nearby, its ribbon slightly crooked. I noticed it without comment, but something about seeing it there, kept, not discarded, made my chest ache in a good way. Anna stood by the bassinet for a moment, adjusting Emily's blanket. Then she turned to me. "You want to hold her again?" she asked. I nodded, my throat tightening. "If you're okay with it." She walked over and gently lifted Emily, then crossed the room. When she placed her in my arms, I felt that same surge I'd felt the first time, like holding something impossibly small and yet infinitely important. Emily's warmth settled into me, quieting the nerves that had been humming all evening. I looked down at her tiny face, the way her mouth twitched in her sleep, and something deep inside me shifted. I'd missed so much of Anna's life, but maybe, if I was lucky, I wouldn't miss Emily's. When I looked up, Anna was watching me. Her expression was hard to read, soft around the edges, but still guarded. "You're good with her," she said quietly. I gave a small smile. "I had a good teacher. Your grandma was patient with me when you were this small." Anna's gaze flickered, a mix of nostalgia and distance. She sat down in the armchair across from me, tucking her legs under her. There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of the clock ticking softly on the wall. "I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen," she said finally. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "I wouldn't ask you to." Her eyes stayed on mine. "I can't promise to forget everything. There's a lot I'm still angry about. A lot I don't understand." I swallowed, feeling my grip on Emily tighten just slightly. Not out of fear, but out of wanting to hold on to this moment. "I know," I said, "and you don't have to forget. I hope someday you might see things more clearly, but whether you do or not, I'm here." Anna looked down at her hands, then back up at me. "I can't promise to forget," she repeated. "But—" She paused, the word hanging between us. "But what?" I asked softly. Her gaze softened, but I'm willing to try again. The words landed in my chest with a weight I hadn't expected. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. But it was something better, because it was real. A door that had been locked for years wasn't suddenly thrown wide open. but it wasn't sealed shut anymore either. I felt my eyes sting, but I kept my voice even. That's all I could ever ask for. She glanced at Emily, then back at me. This isn't going to be easy. I know, I said, but nothing worth doing ever is. She gave a faint smile at that, one that looked almost like the smile she used to give me when she was a little girl, and I'd promised her ice cream after school. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope. Not the desperate, reaching hope of someone begging to be let back in, but the steady, careful kind that grows slowly, quietly, and doesn't vanish overnight. I handed Emily back to Anna, watching as she settled the baby against her shoulder. It's getting late, I said, standing. Anna walked me to the door. At the threshold, we paused. She shifted Emily gently, careful not to wake her. Thanks for coming, she said. Thanks for inviting me, I replied. There was a moment of hesitation before she added, maybe we can do this again, soon. I smiled, the kind of smile that feels like the first warm day after a long winter. I'd like that. We stood there for a moment, the unspoken things hanging between us, years of distance, years of silence, years of pain. None of it gone, but none of it insurmountable. As I walked to my truck, the night air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer. I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It wasn't a happy ending wrapped in a neat bow. It was just a fragile beginning. One dinner, one conversation, one promise at a time. Driving home, I realized something important. The distance between us might never disappear completely. But tonight, for the first time, we'd started to measure it differently. And that was enough.